Hey there, this is Josh Cummings. I am one of the Spring Security committers, and I thought a set of interesting YouTube videos would be to see how someone on the Spring Security team might change how Spring Security is being used inside of other projects. So I thought, you know what, I'll go ahead and just search for usages of Spring Security and just see how I might change it. I have already, before starting the video, checked out this particular project onto my machine. And so I want to head over there and see what's going on and what we might be able to improve. One of the first things that I like to look at in a project is to see if it has any tests. And this one doesn't. That's okay. It can be added. To know what to test, we can look at the controller layer, since that's often the area that we want to secure. And this has 3 endpoints: admin, user, and hello. It looks like this is kind of just like a learning application for this individual. Let's go ahead and test. We'll start by testing this one, the user. And I want to look at their security configuration super quick and see what kinds of permissions are needed. So it looks like this one, it needs the user permission. So we'll go ahead and test that. A get for user that has the user permission. Okay, great. What I want to use let's see. Is mockMVC. We'll go ahead and auto wire it. Let's see. Not sure why. We'll go ahead and copy that reference and import it. There we are. Thank you, IntelliJ. And then we'll go ahead and change this. User requires role user. One of the things that you can do with Spring Security is you can have a mock user and that mock user you can specify a role. So roles are case sensitive in Spring Security, so I'll specify that the role is user, and then I'll use mockMVC to perform a get request against /user. And let's see if we can find, no matter. There we go. We'll use this request builder. Let's see. Copy reference. And go ahead and import that as well. How funny. Good thing this isn't an IntelliJ demo. And then let's just make this a little bigger so you can see that. And we'll add the static import. Okay, cool. mockMVC throws an exception for the perform, so I was just throw it myself. Okay, good. So this is going to put a user inside of the security context. It's going to be a mock security context, so actually no authentication is being performed. It's just placing it there inside of the security context holder so that all of the filters in the filter chain are satisfied. And we're going to expect that the status is okay. There we go. IntelliJ found that one. Okay. And then we'll also add one more. And, oops, not here. Let's change this. when user has user role, then success. And we'll have another test, and we won't give it that role when user role is missing, then denied. And so we'll do the same thing here. And it's going to look the same from this standpoint, but from this other standpoint here, what's happening inside of a test execution listener is that Spring Security is supplying a value. And while it is doing that here, in this case, it's not supplying the needed role. So we should see a forbidden because we didn't have enough permission to be able to do that. So let's go ahead and run these and make sure that they are correct. I actually don't know if they'll be correct, but okay, good. All right, great. So we're getting a 403 when there's no role supplied, and we're getting a 200 when the right role is supplied. Great. I added those so that we can make sure that we don't break anything as we move along and look through this application. All right, so taking a look. Not much to see inside of the Spring Boot main method. And so let's just hop over to the security config. Sometimes some security configuration is inside that as well. So let's take a look at this. Okay, the first thing that stands out is, well, the first thing that stands out is the imports could be cleaned up. That'll just help us read it a little bit better. There's nothing particularly about security. The first thing about security is this annotation right here. In a Spring Boot application, enable web security is supplied so long as you have this dependency, Spring Boot Starter Security. If you have that dependency, then enable web security is already there. You can add it if you want just for clarity, so it's clear that you're enabling web security. And if you go down that route, then make sure to add like enable web MVC and all the other enable annotations that are provided to you by default. But it's unnecessary, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And then while it's fine to use the with default password encoder, it's there. It's forever deprecated to let you know that don't release this to production. You can use something different. You can generate a bcrypt password. I encourage people to take a look at Spring CLI, which I'm not demoing right now, that you can use to create a quick bcrypt password, and it's pretty easy to use, so you don't have to do this. But this is definitely just fine for testing purposes. Probably the one thing I would change though is I would change this to a user details service, just because it's the interface. That's the common interface that various implementations in Spring Security and otherwise use to go pull out the user from an underlying database. So that way, if and when this changes away from in-memory, it will, you can still have the same definition. In that regard, I'll go ahead and just change this to user. Some of this is just preference on my part, and doesn't have as much to do with using Spring Security correctly, but it's a nice idiomatic thing to be doing. All right, so now the security filter chain. In 6.0, this became the preferred way to set up the filter chain. It used to be that you would extend Web Security Configure Adapter, which has been updated and simplified to just publishing the bean straight up. So I guess the first thing that I want to change here is I want to make sure that this is correct. When we talk about the security filter chain, like inside of a request, that's kind of when you're in the filter chain, is when it's processing a request. Here, it's more correct probably to say inside or something like constructing security filter chain. That's just semantics. Just I want people to understand that. The next thing is we noticed over here that there are only gets. Get. So in that case, CSRF doesn't matter. And while I know that this is probably like going to add stuff later on, I only want to relax my security standards as needed, as opposed to like anticipating a relaxation that I'm going to want later on. We can always relax our requirements, it's much harder for us to tighten them up after we've had them lax. So I like keeping them nice and tight first, and since it's only get mappings, we don't need to even consider CSRF at all. It only matters for posts and puts and deletes. The next thing I'm doing here is I am formatting it. I know this might seem like Josh is just doing what he prefers to make it readable, but it's not. There's a special reason for this. And the reason is because the DSL is written with a bunch of top-level DSL methods. And each one of these represents a filter, usually one single filter, maybe multiple filters. And so if I write it this way, then I personally find it that it's easier to conceptualize the filter chain. Okay, this is one filter, and then here's another filter. And there are different schools of thought on whether to do each one of these separately, but I'll just show you what it looks like if we do it like this. And so you can see from here, yes, what I have is I have the authorization filter, and I have the authentication filter for HTTP basic. Wonderful. Good. That's looking pretty good from a format standpoint. Let's make sure we didn't break anything. I'm just going to run the tests again. And here we go. Let's give them a shot. Nice. Things are still working. We didn't break anything, which makes sense. We didn't actually change how the APIs were really being used. So nothing would necessarily be expected. This is a point of, think about what you want to do. The fact is that there's only 3 endpoints anyway. And as they get added, maybe that will change and what have you. But what this says is if it's admin, then require this. If it's user, require this. If it's hello, don't require anything. And any other requests, please just make sure they're authenticated. So I personally think it's a little bit better from a security posture standpoint to just deny anything, and the reason is because this is an exhaustive representation of the app, right? This represents everything that you could possibly request. So if you try anything else, I just want to deny you. I don't want to have to deal with things that I haven't specified yet or things that I'm going to forget about. So I'll just deny anything that I haven't specified. It's perfectly fine to do authenticated here as well. It's just a nice, stronger security posture if you are denying anything that you haven't specified. And since this is a simple enough app where all of the endpoints can be described here above, then that means we can just safely deny everything else so that anything unexpected, I don't have to worry about them getting in because they had a legitimate account or something like that, and a problematic endpoint. Okay, cool. The other thing that I would change here is when it comes to roles, this is the syntax, right? It's capital role underscore admin. It's quite common for folks to do this with a capital, and there's nothing wrong with that either way. I do want to point out that if you do has authority, then you won't have to deal with the prefix, and it is, just a little bit simpler as you're looking at the authorities. They just have this word inside of them. They don't have any prefix. The reason that you'd use has role and other things that have a prefix would be to be able to tell the source of the authorization. Like if it's role underscore, it probably came from your RBAC database. And if it's scope underscore, it probably came from like a JOT claim. And that can be helpful from a string standpoint if you need to know what's called provenance, where the authority came from. But I find that a lot of people don't really care, and so I think this just simplifies in the rest of your app. When you're looking at the authorities, they won't have that prefix in front of it. Now that is going to break something, and so because here I'm specifying a role instead of an authority, so it's going to try and prefix it. Excuse me, not that one. Oh yeah, that one. Okay, cool. It should have been an okay, but it's not because it doesn't have the right permission. So let's just change this to authorities, and then we'll try again. Perfect. Okay, cool. All right, we are pretty close. There's one other thing that I would probably change here, and it just sort of depends on what I actually mean with each one of these. So for example, if an admin is a user, then you have a couple of decisions to make when you're logging in. Either when you have to give the admin both of these, right? Both permissions. Ooh, let's change this to authorities as well. The reason these didn't break is because remember that when we're mocking, it mocks the authentication. It's not actually consulting this during the tests, during those tests. So the other thing that I would do is I would publish a role hierarchy. And this isn't using method security, so I think that it's just fine to not publish it as a static bean. But when we're affecting method security, we have it as a static bean because method security uses Spring AOP, which happens much earlier inside of the bean application, in the application context process. And so we make it static so nothing else has to be constructed at the same time. So I'll go ahead, oops. Oh, let's see, what version is this? It might not have this feature. Let's see, aha! Okay, here, let's go ahead and upgrade too. This will be super fun. So, let's see. There we go, that'll do. So we'll go ahead and upgrade Spring Boot to the latest. It doesn't look there are any other dependencies specified. Ooh. Huh. I'm not sure what that is, but let's not worry about it for the moment because I can still make my point otherwise, which is, let's see, we can go ahead and do it in a different way. Oops. So if we say roles, I'm just batting 1,000, huh? There we go. Dot set hierarchy. Then we can go ahead and say that user implies admin. So if user implies admin, oh, excuse me, I think, yeah, if user implies admin, then that means, oh, excuse me, user doesn't imply admin, right? Admin implies user. And what that means is if I'm an admin, then I also automatically have user privileges. So let's, so when I publish that, authorize HTTP requests should pick that up. And since this is an older version, actually it might not. So just full disclosure, unless I'm able to figure out how to get that upgraded, this might fail because I think this feature also, this particular, that this would pick that up was also added recently. And if not, then just know it for the future. If you were to upgrade it and use this, then it would be a little bit better. Let's see. So first of all, let's make sure everything still runs. Okay. And then next what I want to do is I want to show that if all I have is admin, and again this might fail because we're on an older version of Spring Boot, but if I'm an admin and I hit the user endpoint, then now it's still going to work because admin implies the user role. So let's try that. All right, cool, awesome. So it does look like it picked it up. That's great. I'm happy to see that. So this is a nice thing to do because it can be easy to forget to assign all the authorities that you need. So if you can come up with a tree that represents how your users are, how your authorities are related to one another, then this can be a really handy thing to have in your pocket. Okay, cool. So I think that this is an application that is much better set up for future usage. I'm just going to quickly review what we did. the first thing that we did is we wrote a few tests to make sure that we didn't break anything. We used Spring Security's mock MVC support to be able to hit the endpoints and see how they reacted from an authorization standpoint. Each one of these, we added the appropriate permission to them to see if it would work. And then we changed a little bit of the formatting so that it's easier to see which filters are in the filter chain, and change these to authorities. Since it doesn't really seem that this application needs to know the difference between like RBAC and something else, we can just use authorities instead of having the prefixes there. Change this to correctly state that what we're doing right now is we're building the security filter chain, we're constructing it, and then published a role hierarchy so that admins automatically get the user role. Once you're granted the admin role, you're also automatically assumed to have the user role. The last thing that we did, at least that I remember, is that I went ahead and said any other request that I haven't specified here, we're going to deny. It's a simple enough application where, since everything is specified here exhaustively, I can just at the end say and deny everything else in case I've forgotten something. Oh yeah, and then one more thing that we did is we turned off CSRF. We kept CSRF on, and the reason for that is because these are all gets. So CSRF isn't necessary. We can always relax security restrictions later on when it's clear that we need them, but not before. Okay, great. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time.